Hello, Andy.
Hi, Raj.
Hi. Can everybody see me, hear me?
Yeah, welcome. This is Raj Kumar. He's our National Chair of the NHS Clinical Leads Network. He's going to kindly kick things off, and we've got a few slides here, Raj, that we can go through and cover the ground rules and things like that.
Thank you so much, Andy, and Susie. Thank you for the hard work and being able to pull and launch the session for the Northwest region. Delighted to welcome our speakers for today, which includes Rob Webster and Claire Fuller and also Maria Smith. I'm also pleased that we've managed to relaunch the digital action learning sets, which commenced after the pandemic started. They were used to be face-to-face action learning sets, but we did convert them to digital action learning sets during the period of the pandemic, and that sort of took a bit of a backseat over the last year. So I think now is the time when it's a time of significant change, and I'm really, really pleased that we're able to bring together the CLN cohorts from across the Northwest region together, and to be able to pull together a regular schedule of DALs, or digital action learning sets, and also do what the NHS CLN does best, linking up people who are national leaders with local leaders, frontline leaders and regional leaders. We have the ICSs who have all come online this year, and I think this is a body which we really need to be, all of us need to be able to work with, whether we have national roles or local roles, and the development and the change and the transformation that one's going to be seeing, led by ICSS, is probably going to be the most significant element of change that we are going to be seeing over the course of the next 5 years. So delighted to get this afternoon launched off, and a huge welcome to the speakers. Just a little bit about the timing. So once the plenary sessions do settle, we would thank you very much indeed, Susie. Yeah, as you can see, that is the you all should have received the agendas. Once the plenary sessions do settle, you'll all be going into your delegated DALs learning sets with your facilitators. Now, Susie, I'm assuming that that's going to be happening automatically. Would people be moving across? They don't have to do anything?
Yes, Dawn will whiz her magic up later on about 4 o'clock, and you should also automatically put into your DALs. We have a backup in case it doesn't work, but yes, it'll all happen smoothly.
Lovely. Okay, if you go to the next slide, please. Wonderful. Don't worry if you can't attend all the speaker sessions, or those of you who are actually joining a bit late, and they're all going to be recorded, and they will be available on the CLN site. Just as a rule, I know you can all read the slide, but I'm still going to read it out. Please do ensure that you have your mute button during the speaker sessions, and use the chat function. I would prefer that we use more of the chat function in terms of asking questions. And if you do feel you need to verbalize it and vocalize it, do raise your hand, and we'll ask your question to the speaker. So Susie should be able to support any queries that do come in, and all of you have been allocated to your independent DALS group. But if there's a problem, by all means, just send a private message to Susie, and we should be able to sort that for you. And you got the Menti website and the code there. Please do write the code down, and that's a route you're going to be taking to be able to access the Menti system. So otherwise, I just hope that all of you have a wonderful day, and hopefully this is the beginning of a series of DALs that we will continue to host, and host a series of national and regional speakers to come in and meet all of us. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Raj, that's great. Thank you very much. The only thing that's slightly changed from the notes that you had is that the questions now, we've actually launched a Q&A specific piece on the top of the screen. If people look at the top of the screen next to, between reactions and apps, there's a Q&A button. rather than using the chats. Although if people do put things in chat, we will try and obviously get to those. But we're going to use the Q&A specifically for the questions. The chat screen, as you notice on bullet point 4 on the slide, is for people to put either a chat in, or if they haven't been allocated to one of the digital action learning sets, if they put their name, title and ICS footprint in, then Dawn will allocate them so that they can go automatically when we break out into the breakout sessions of the digital action learning sets. But that's great. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Over to you, Andy.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I just wanted to, before we get into the to start this fully, I wanted to welcome everybody. We've got about 70 people, 70 clinical and care leaders.
Andy, you've just gone on mute.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I just wanted to welcome everybody today. We have got about 70 clinicians coming to this meeting, a whole mix of specialisms and types of clinicians and care leaders. And it's a great opportunity to begin to look at the changing dynamic in the world and the integrated care approaches that we're now seeing developed across the northwest of England in the 3 ICS footprints. But to put
Sorry, Andy, you've gone on mute again.
I don't know why it keeps going on mute. Okay. What I wanted to try and do was just give a couple of minutes why the NHS CLN has been commissioned by the Northwest region to work with the 3 ICSs and support them with their professional and care leadership work, obviously in an attempt to bring about a successful integrated care approach. What we're doing today are the digital action learning sets, which are the core to some of the transformational change, some of the leadership, some of the sharing of best experiences, and bringing in some local and national leaders and thought leaders to discuss where things are up to in the development of integrated care across both provision and commissioning and social care and voluntary sector. But if you look at the slide, the CLN, as part of that offering, has a whole raft of things that fit in and around this. On the left-hand side, we've got the first 2 bubbles are about supporting personal development for people. And in parallel with the session, these digital action learning sets will be running a year's course for emerging clinical and care leaders, which I know a large number of you have attended already, and an advanced leaders program, which we are clinical and care leaders program that we're going to be starting in the new year, which is specifically about leading system transformational change across a whole system. And that fits nicely with the emerging one, and it progresses on, and it will be relevant to what we're doing in these digital action learning sets and link in with it directly. We'll be doing these bi-monthly transformation meetings, the digital action learning sets. You'll also notice there we run a national congress which will tie into what we're doing, and we'll be looking for the Northwest as almost a spearhead region to be playing into that national congress, and giving you a chance to talk about some of the things you've experienced within the NHS CLN as we're doing this piece of work. Two pieces that then go with that: the CLN Ambassador Programme, which are the senior CLN members that have been around since about 2005, who are in senior roles right across the country, and they will help and support us as we go forward with the programme. And Susie Ning leads the CLN Associate Programme, which is a chance for our NHS professional managers to link with the CLN, particularly in relation to their day jobs where they work, and how it can tie and be supported by the CLN's activity. And the whole thing is underpinned by our transformational change programs around clinical leadership and clinical engagement. We call it our standard operating model. And during some of these digital action learning sets, we'll bring a refresh of that learning that is internationally based and has been built since 2005 and pretty much evidence-based and highly effective. So we're going to bring that to you and try and introduce that into these bi-monthly transformational programs. So I just wanted to give you a taster for that, so that you can see that the digital action learning sets in today's sessions are part of a complete offering that is a bespoke package, which can be also tailored specifically to each ICS and ICB's requirements. Okay, thank you very much. We've got nearly 50 people of the 70 in now, so we're doing okay. I think a few more will obviously come forward. This is the first of 3 meetings, the 10th of November. We've got another one booked for the 19th of January, which will focus more on social care leadership and the theory of change. And we've got some speakers hopefully lined up, and I'll tell you about that at the end of the day. And the 23rd of March, when we're looking at strategic community partners, voluntary sector, housing, and also the turning of information and business intelligence into action. Because in your action learning sets, we will over time feed you with your local footprints, business intelligence, so that you have a feeling for how the system is moving as we go through the year and look at the integrated care approaches that are facilitated and supported by the system and the integrated care boards. Next slide, Susie, if you would. Hand over to you. Susie is going to talk to you about Menti that we're going to use during the course of today to help you visualize what your thoughts are on screen. Thanks, Susie.
Thank you, everybody. If you've got an opportunity just to use your laptop or any smart device you've got to hand, what we want you to do, just for a couple of minutes, if you could just log on to www.menti.com and type in the code 18374919. I'd like you to answer the question about what you want to get out of today. What are your expectations? What do you hope to get? What we'll try and do towards the end of the session is do a bit of reflection on whether we think we've met some of those expectations, and if we haven't, we'll make sure that we tie those into future sessions. I'm going to try and do something nifty now and try and get the Menti up. There we go. So fantastic. Thank you for those that have already put some stuff in. We'll just wait a minute or two just for some more feedback, and then when we've done that, we'll hand over to our first speaker.
This Menti feedback, Susie, I think is going to be incredibly useful to understand what the people attending today, the clinical and care leaders, are thinking. And just to tell you all that the range of yourselves is leadership across the whole system. We've got board members coming today from both provision and commissioning. We've got people who are in the system on the ground, in community, in hospitals, who are leaders as well. So we're going to get a good overview of people's thoughts and feelings. And I think the digital action learning sets should be really informative because each one's professionally facilitated.
Thank you. This is great. Connections, networking, broaden knowledge, broadening understanding, finding out how it feels on the front line. Absolutely. So this is fantastic. So what we'll do, we will summarise all of this, and we'll have a short report published at the end of this session, and we'll share this with you. But keep putting those in as we go through. We're having another Menti session a bit later on, and we'll move on to the next question there. But if you want to just, as things crop up, if you just want to add to that, that's absolutely fine as well. That's okay, fantastic. Andy, I'll go back to the presentation and take it to the, if you could introduce our first speaker, please.
Thank you, everybody, for logging on to Menti. That's really useful. We're lucky enough today and kind that Rob Webster has agreed to come and talk with us today. Rob is obviously a chief executive from West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership. Rob was awarded a CBE in 2020 for his contribution for healthcare leadership. The Health Service Journal HSJ's NHS CEO of the Year in 2021. Rob, I can agree, I've spoken to Rob many times, is an outstanding leader with a wealth of knowledge and experience, and hopefully will inspire and motivate us all this afternoon when we hear some of the positive messages he's got and some of his experiences, which I personally find incredibly uplifting. Rob, thank you for attending.
Thanks, Andy, for that introduction. Hello, everybody. My name's Rob. I'm the Chief Exec of NHS West Yorkshire and the lead Chief Executive of the West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership. And I describe myself in that way because the Health and Care Partnership is an integrated care system, and the system, it remains a system as well as having within it a new statutory body, which is the Integrated Care Board. And that's fundamental, really. And I'll talk a bit about why that is. Really pleased to be with you all today. It's always good to have a conversation with other people from different places, with different backgrounds, different perspectives. And hopefully we can have a bit of a conversation today. I think I've been asked to speak for about 20 minutes, and I'll give you some insights into part of the work we do. This is a very small fraction of what we're collectively trying to achieve across West Yorkshire. I can see there's a couple of West Yorkshire folk on the call too. So if I start telling porkies or over-egging it, I'd expect them to put their hands up and go like this, or tell you all that it's not really like that. It's really much worse. So I think I'm sharing my slides today, if that's okay with everybody. I'll show you some pictures as we go along, because I don't presume that you know what West Yorkshire is, what it covers, or any of that stuff, and it might be useful to show you. I do know a bit about the Northwest, having been born and brought up there, and through some of my sporting associations. So I do know a bit about your turf. And I am married to a Scouser, so I do spend quite a bit of time in the Northwest. But I don't expect you to know anything at all about West Yorkshire, so I'm starting from that premise. If I just share my screen then. I think it's really good that you've got this set of arrangements and this conversation going on. And my suggestion to you all would be to get as much out of it as possible. And in doing so, I'm giving you the permission to ask as many difficult or daft questions as you like. I don't mind either, really. There's no such thing as a daft or a difficult question. So I'm really going to focus on inequalities today. And we've got a saying in West Yorkshire is, we should stop admiring the problem, start doing something about it. And this is particularly pertinent, I think, for health inequalities. And as we all live and work in the north of England, we know that those inequalities are substantial. I'll start by showing you a couple of pictures of where we are. So in West Yorkshire is the picture on the left, which is our geography. For those of you who do know your geography, you're immediately going to say Craven's in there. That's in North Yorkshire, isn't it, Rob? Well, it is, but for administrative purposes, it's in West Yorkshire.
I'm not sure it's well, at least it's not moved on for me. I don't know if it's moved on for other people.
Can I check?
We're just seeing the slides deck at the moment, Rob.
Does it move on when I do that?
It does, yeah.
Okay, so I'll try and I will stick to that, and I'll try and make it slightly bigger so people can see it. Okay, you get these slides anyway. I think these slides are more of an aid memoir for later on than for you to read assiduously. So picture on the left is West Yorkshire. There are 6 councils, 10 trusts, 52 primary care networks, thousands of third sector organisations, etc. in West Yorkshire. And as I was saying, North Yorkshire, the bit of North Yorkshire that is Craven, is counted as West Yorkshire for administrative purposes. And it's like most of the ICSs in the Northwest, it's big, it's complicated, and at the same time, it's fairly simple. And we can keep it simple. And if we do, we can make change together. And the reason we have ICSs is, I think, fundamentally a sound one. So if you look at my career history up until 2016, I was at my last job before becoming an ICB chief exec and a trust chief executive was as chief exec of the NHS Confederation. And my big drive at that time was to try and move away from episodic approaches to care with planning around organisations in single years to planning in places for the medium term. And the reason for that is that if you work in a hospital, you can look at the depth of coding for the people who are in that hospital and see that on average they've got over 3 things that they live with every day. And that the majority, the people who come in the most have 5 or more things wrong with them that they live with every day. If you work in primary community services, you can see the mental, physical and social needs of people interact with each other significantly. So the idea that we live in an environment where we should be dealing with institutions and episodic care is redundant, because you can't be cured of having COPD, asthma, diabetes, schizophrenia, dementia, being frail, having a special educational need. You just live with it. And the idea that you are discharged from services when you take a population health view is also redundant. So what we should really be doing is thinking about, how do we consider meeting the mental, physical and social needs of people in their communities? And once we start to ask that question, then two things become apparent straight away. The first is that their health is largely driven by things outside the control of the health and care system. So 80% of the things that impact upon our health have nothing to do with the NHS. Have we got a job? How are we educated? Where do we live? What's the state of our housing, etc.? Or more simply, do we have somewhere to live, somebody to love and something to do? 10% of what affects our health is to do with, can you access services when you need them? And 10% of it is, are those services any good? So 80% of our impact as a health and care system can be strengthened, or 80% of the impact on people's health can be strengthened if we start to think about those wider determinants. Now, that they're all driven by the place. So the places where you and I all live will determine how long we live and how well we'll be. Just look at your Director of Public Health report. So what you need to do is to plan in places with partners who deal with those issues, so you can think about those wider determinants, think about access to care, and think about joining up care to meet people's mental, physical and social needs, most of whom will never be cured of the issues that they've got and will be partners of ours. That's why we have ICSs, STPs and so on. So since 2016, all of us have been working together, informally at first, although it's government policy, and now statutorily, to do 4 things. And I'm really delighted that these are set out in statute, and that's what it says on the right. We're here to improve outcomes for people. In doing that, we should tackle inequalities, which are desperate. We should enhance productivity and value for money, because we should not be wasting public money. And the money that we spend is an investment, and we should support broader social and economic development. So, for example, in West Yorkshire, we spend £5 billion. We have 100,000 staff working in health and care. We are a fundamental part of the economy. That's an investment. We bring supply chain, jobs, all sorts of things that could affect those wider determinants. If we think about it in those terms, we could act differently. And I might talk about that a little bit in a minute. West Yorkshire is a diverse place with a diverse population. I won't go through this in great detail, but just to give you an example, it's very similar to the Northwest in many ways. There are fundamental differences between the north and the south of the country, as set out in the Northern Health Science Alliance reports into Child of the North, the impact of the pandemic, etc. So one really good statistic which epitomises that, I think, is that the national programme, Core 20 Plus, says you should focus on the bottom quintile of the population, the 20% who live in the poorest parts of the country. And when you even that across the country, that's the lowest quintile. When you look at West Yorkshire, 36% of people live in that quintile, and actually 22% live in the lowest decile of income deprivation. So we have a much poorer, much iller population. It's very diverse. 400,000 people care for somebody because they love them as an unpaid carer, and children are more likely to live in poverty than adults. That makes us, like you, NHS Greater Manchester's up there, look, NHS Cheshire and Merseyside, NHS Lancashire and South Cumbria. You and we are in that bunch at the top of the most deprived, the areas with the biggest inequalities in the country. And it won't be any surprise to you. And the impact of that is felt in our places. So I could do this in any of our 5 places, Bradford, Colesdale, Kirklees, Wakefield or Leeds. And this is actually Bradford, District and Craven. So on that map that I started with at the top, the sticky up bit there, top left, if you draw that map in terms of life expectancy from North Yorkshire down to Manningham in Bradford, then as it will be the same in Wigan as it was in Rochdale, whether it's parts of Liverpool, you'll have the same story. 10-year difference in life expectancy, getting on the bus from Wharfdale and getting off in Manningham in Bradford. What's even worse, which is less understood, is that healthy life expectancy is more than 20 years different. So the age at which you become affected by a life-limiting condition or an issue that you will always live with. Sounds like somebody's walking down a hospital corridor at the moment. If you can go on mute, that'd be really helpful. It varies by over 20 years. And the public know this, and the public know that we need to do stuff if we're going to look at the wider determinants, think about how they access services and join them up. So just to give you a couple of bits of insight from our latest research with Healthwatch, what are people saying? Well, actually, they're on the same side as Teresa Coffey. I want to be able to see the GP. I want someone to look after my sister, my mum, my grandma, my son in care terms. I want to be able to get to see a dentist. I want the ambulance to turn up if I ring it. I want to get my operation in good time. But actually, I also want to come home to a place where I'm surrounded by people who love me if I leave the hospital. I want you to understand that mental health and physical health and joining that and getting access is important. And I want you to understand that cost of living is going to make my life harder and potentially make me iller. So the public have a view about health inequalities. Now, since 2016, we've been working together as a true partnership. It's made up of councils, the NHS, the third sector and communities. Everybody is in this partnership. Everybody. It doesn't matter if you're an acute trust, a council, a GP practice, a third sector organisations, you are in the partnership. And this is one of the reasons why I keep reinforcing that this system is a system. It continues to be a system because it's the system that matters to somebody who's old and frail and living in Manningham, somebody who's young, has a special educational need or a stammer and lives in Wharfdale. It's the system that matters to them and the system around them that's going to help improve their lives. So in West Yorkshire, we all know we're part of the system. I always use the old adage, you've got to realise that, if you're worried about traffic, when you've got to realise you are the traffic. You're not in it. You're not in traffic, you are traffic. So in the same way, if you're worried about the system and it not working, recognise that's you. You are in the system. So West Yorkshire, we're all in the system. We work to a set of principles about being ambitious, this being a true partnership. You don't play at it, you're in it or you're not. So we don't have any associate partners, everyone's a partner, and everyone signed the MOU that underpins our partnership since 2016. That partnership is councils, the NHS third sector. We agree all of the information and intelligence and what it's telling us. We then act. We don't have to agree on the actions, but we will act. We use the governance that exists to make good decisions, and subsidiarity applies. So things get done in people's houses first. If they can't be done there, they get done in their neighbourhoods. If they can't be done there, they get done in their places. And if they need to get done in West Yorkshire, they are. In 2016, we produced a strategy. In 2018, we updated it with actions that were being delivered for the public. And in 2020, we had our latest strategy published just before the pandemic. And what that said,
I think we might have just lost Rob for a minute.
I think we have. Hopefully he's going to come back. Technical problem.
Oh, he's back. Are you back, Rob?
Sorry, I think I got booted out by speaking somewhere else. I'm at a hotel. I think they just booted me out of the internet.
Thanks for coming back, Rob.
Can I just check what you can you still see that slide?
Yes, we're still on 10 of our big ambition slide.
Okay, right. Does that move again when I move it?
Yes, all good.
Yeah, okay. So what we decided to do, in 2020 was to say, okay, we understand that we've got to have a plan and a strategy that covers off the 176 things NHS England need from us, but we work beyond NHS England, and no one can remember all of those. So we'll focus on 10 big ambitions. 3 are about health inequalities, the fact that people do have this 20-year healthy life expectancy gap. We'll focus on the fact that people with serious mental illness and learning disabilities die 20 years sooner, even though learning disability is not a health condition. We'll focus on children and poverty. We'll then focus on some of the big killers. So we have some of the best cancer services in the world, but we have some of the poorest cancer outcomes. And that's because people present late. And we'll focus on things like antimicrobial resistance, suicide, which is the biggest killer of young men, and maternal mortality. And then we'll focus on some societal issues. We need to have a leadership which is representative of the population, which doesn't all look like me. We need to make sure that we recognise the economic impact we have, and we need to play our part in climate change. Having had once in a generation floods in Colesdale 3 times in 10 years, it's pretty obvious what's going on, even before the record temperatures last summer. So we've got 10 big ambitions which are rooted in inequality. But we also believe that we should stop admiring the problem and start doing something about it, and that real change happens in real work. So for 6 years prior to, 4 years, sorry, prior to that, we'd been doing service reconfigurations, implementing best practice around cardiovascular disease and hypertension, case finding in poorer communities first, making sure that we reduce the number of strokes, ensuring that ATUs were fit and proper. And we've been doing that through our provider collaboratives, our places, and our ICS, because we are a single system, which is focused on a set of shared outcomes. Coming into this idea of making sure that we focus significantly on health inequalities, we'd already moving from a position of strength. So the organisation Carnal Farrow, which people may have come across, did a piece of work that said, how are people getting on with integration and joining up services and improving things for local people, based on some analysis and based on deprivation. And what they said was that our system, amongst some others, was doing very well, despite high levels of deprivation, in delivering successful integration. So from a position of strength, from a strong partnership bent, what we're saying now, and what we've been saying for the last couple of years, is if we genuinely want to sort this out, then we're going to have to focus on 3 things. Can we build capacities to deliver improvements in health inequalities? Do we have the capability to do it, the skills and talent? And do we have the intelligence to know where to focus? So in West Yorkshire, we always focus on things where we can make a difference at this level. As I said, subsidiarity applies, and we only focus on West Yorkshire things when it's good practice, a wicked issue we want to solve, or a matter of scale. And improving population health as elements of all 3. So what we've got is a population health programme board made up of the distributed leadership of people from all of the organisations in West Yorkshire, which focuses on a range of high impact things, some of the 10 big ambitions that I talked about. So focusing on climate. So let's do quick and easy things. Well, not so easy actually, but quick things like reducing the anaesthetic gases which cause greenhouse effects. Let's look at antimicrobial resistance, ensure that we have diabetes prevention, make sure our housing supports people's health, and that we have a health inequalities network made up of people who can make a difference and focus on the right things. And that has the connections to the system, whether it's the providers, the places, or regional and national colleagues, and that we do all of the right things. So what does that mean in practice? Well, in terms of building capacity, last winter, we knew that we topped up council work around winter warmth by increasing that by £1 million for fuel poverty. The £10.8 million additional recurrent funding for the Core 20+5 framework, half of that went to places to deliver against their local requirements based on the fact that populations are different in different places. That was allocated on the basis of what proportion of people did you have in the lowest decile of deprivation. So Craven got none of that money because it doesn't have anybody in that decile of deprivation. Bradford got more of the money. You can see where I'm going with that. Half of the money was, the other half of the money was distributed onto things which were the targeted groups, the plus elements, including gypsies and travellers, asylum seekers, people with learning disability, etc. So I could keep on through that, but what we've done is try and build capacity and capability with real money. We've tried to ensure that we have better intelligence, building on public health. We have connections with communities who are seldom heard, so we have better insight and intelligence. And alongside the capacity and intelligence, the capability piece is driven by a combination of things. We have our health inequalities networks, which are focusing on some different populations. So people living in the most deprived decile, so poverty, people with mental health, learning disabilities and autism, rough sleepers, young carers, and women and children at risk of violent crime. Now, you will have noticed that those things have just got harder because of the pandemic. Violent crime's gone up, child sexual exploitation's gone up, domestic violence has gone up, for example. Homelessness and vulnerable housing is a problem in the current economic position. So what we've got is a position where we have communities of practice of people working across West Yorkshire from all sectors who are interested, driving real and meaningful change. Now, over and above that, we've got Health and Equalities Academy, which is bringing together those assets and then looking at things where we can make a difference with interesting work. So part of that includes a Health Equity Fellowship, which is just coming to the end of the first year. 32 people from any part of the system supported to focus 1 day a week on a topic or an issue that's going to improve health inequalities that can be scaled. We just got the call out for the next 70 people to be Health Equity Fellows. And we've got everybody from A&E consultants through to the chair of the ICB, through to healthcare support workers, public health doctors involved in this. It's a fantastic piece of work, which is helping to build our capability. So this is all good stuff that is making a difference with real people doing real work and real change. So that, for example, the 15,000 people whose blood pressure is now better controlled have mostly been case found in poorer communities because of the work we do. Driven. Over and above that, once you start to get into this space, what you can recognise is that there are some things we just have to sort out. So race inequality is driven by a number of factors, not having representative leadership, not commissioning effectively, not thinking about clinical protocols. So you'll have seen all of the work of the Race and Health Observatory in this space, which is really profoundly positive, I think, in getting us to think differently about the standard tests we use and whether they're appropriate for everybody. And obviously they're not. So pulse oximetry was the first example of that. I know they're going on to other tests too. Alongside that, as a system, we said racism is a problem. And one of the things that we did out of a race equality commission that we commissioned in the first year of the pandemic was say we need to be an anti-racist system. Now, rather than just say that, we've created a movement of 580 organisations, because we're all partners in this partnership, who have become and promote racist behaviours, anti-racist employment and recruitment approaches, and seek to root out racism. And that campaign's fronted by frontline staff from across West Yorkshire. Similarly, we want to be the first trauma-informed system in the country. We're 3 years into that. And with the West Yorkshire Violence Reduction Unit, we're focusing on the fact that trauma drives ill health, and childhood trauma is prevalent in a significant minority of the population. To an extent, we need to change the way we think about organise and deliver care. We've had 2 national conferences. They started as West Yorkshire conferences, but they ended up being national, covering the work that we've done. We focused on suicide and suicide prevention because that affects men more than women, and men in poorer communities most. It's the biggest killer of young men. We focused on pregnancy and smoking in particular age groups based on insight work that we've brought through our public health and other teams. And there are a range of other work that we're doing, which is equally as important, which I won't go through, but you can see there's a pattern of work here around health inequalities, which is driving change and behaviour right across West Yorkshire and making a difference in communities blighted by the economy, intergenerational unemployment, and so on. That's all pretty much stuff that I would have anticipated you would expect me to talk about, but I did want to talk about something else finally before we do some questions. And it's about perspective. So usually when I'm talking about perspective and seeing what's in front of you, I roll out a picture of this person. So this is Dr. Richard Feynman, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist. And if you've ever read any of his books, you'll know what a character he was. But if you never have, you should. And he was also as an educator. And what he taught people was to make up your own mind, look at the data and decide what's really going on. Now, one of the things that was a really lovely clip on YouTube where he talks about this in some detail. So he said, one of the questions I ask people is, where do trees grow from? And everyone says, well, trees grow out of the ground, stupid. You've seen them, haven't you? They're all by the side of the road. When I drive past them on the motorway, they're in the forest, they grow out of the ground. What are you on about? And he says, well, they don't, do they? Trees grow out of the sky. Because we all know trees are important because they produce oxygen. How do they produce oxygen? Well, they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to make wood. So the carbon goes into the wood, so trees come out of the sky. And trees can only grow because the sun shines on them, that's in the sky, and they receive most of the moisture from the air. So trees grow out of the sky, they don't grow out of the ground. And if you think about it long enough, that's been obvious forever. But you have to think about it that way. Now, in the same way, I would ask you to think about who's turning up in your institution and why, and what's been going on in their lives. And if you start to do that, the quality stuff that Rob's been talking about, yeah, it's great, dead interesting. I'd love to get involved in that. I might want to be a clinical, I might want to do one of those sort of inequalities fellowships. But actually, health inequalities affect every single one of us in this room, every single role that we do, and every single person that you see. Once you start to think about that a little bit, and once you start to create a partnership that focuses on that, they start to change what they do. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Ambulance waiting times are a problem for you, they're a problem for us, and we're not meeting the standards. NHS said, yes, they're not meeting the standards. Why is that? Well, a lot of the time because they're conveying a lot of people to hospital, and those people can't be admitted to hospital. Mid Yorkshire did a piece where it said, well, why don't we have a think about who's coming? Who's actually appearing in our hospital? More than 60% of the journeys are from the bottom deciles of deprivation. There's 2 bits of Mid Yorkshire's footprint which drive footfall for people who rang 999 and got an ambulance to bring them here. What happens to them when they arrive? 50% of them go on with no further treatment or requirements. What's going on? Why are they ringing the ambulance? What's going on? Let's have a look at those places where they're coming from. Can they access transport to healthcare services in an era where buses and trains are difficult? Is that part of the driver? So you start with a conversation about one thing, you look at it through an inequalities lens, and you start to think maybe we should be doing something different here. Maybe the solution to this is something different. The other picture is a picture of an award that was won 2 weeks ago by the team in Mid Yorkshire. So across West Yorkshire, one of the things that we've looked at is who's waiting. Waiting is a massive problem. Alongside our 10 big ambitions, our next strategy will also cover waiting and the workforce and a bit more on children. Who's waiting then? When you look at who's waiting, you can see quite quickly, once you use your prioritisation scores, because we're now able to prioritise our waiting lists, aren't we? You can say, well, okay, what sort of people are waiting and what's happening to them? Once you start to do that, you see that people from different backgrounds, if they're from more deprived backgrounds, in some hospitals, if they're from a Black Caribbean, Black African, Bangladeshi or Pakistani background, or if they have a learning disability, despite being in the same prioritisation of clinical need, are waiting much longer. And because the trusts are interested, and because they've looked at the data, you can't unsee that data. You have to do something about it, particularly if you believe real change happens in real work. So ask themselves the question, why is this happening? So in Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust, who did this first, they asked, why is this happening? Because this isn't about that people, this isn't the inverse care law. People already skirted that. They got through the fact they can't see the GP, or people aren't interested, or there's diagnostic overshadowing. We've seen them and we've said they need treatment, and then we've made it that it's harder for them to be seen what's going on. So they've sorted that out. And in Mid Yorkshire, they said we will treat everybody with a learning disability as priority 2, whatever they're in for, and we'll see them and we'll clear them as quickly as we possibly can, because we know that people with a learning disability are much more likely to die of a preventable illness and don't get a good deal, actually, generally from a health and care system. So as you get into this position as leaders, as people in the system where health inequality is important to you, you've got to recognise that it's important to the porter, A&E consultant, ward clerk, nurse, housekeeper in an inpatient setting as it is to anybody in a community or a public health professional. I could keep going on, but I won't. I do think the final thing I'll say is statutorily we are required as systems to tackle health inequalities. We've been doing this without that statutory requirement because in my experience, it lights people up. It's what they want to do. It's what they want to do. It's one of the reasons they come in. They want to go to work to make a difference. They believe in something bigger. The public believe in something bigger. They believe in the NHS as an idea. Universal healthcare, free at the point of need, irrespective of your ability to pay. That seems to me to be something that's really worth holding on to. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That was absolutely inspiring, and it just shows the power of having a whole system view of the data and analytics and bringing in your whole partners in every sense of the word to come up with solutions is powerful and can make a massive impact. So thank you so much for that. I'll open it out to see if there's any questions. Does anybody want to put their hand up? Is there anything they'd like to ask Rob in terms of the stuff he's talked about, or some of the things that you're thinking about in your own system that you think you might be able to give some insight in? Well, while people are having a little think, because it is a lot to take in, Rob, if you don't mind, if I could just ask you a question. So thinking about how you've approached this over these last 8 years now, isn't it? Or 6 years. How have you enabled space for your clinical and care leaders and wider partners to think about these challenges, to receive this information and to actually translate that into action? You know, how have you given that opportunity for that headspace and time to think?
I think it's partly we've started by going where the energy is. So we know that primary care has protected time to consider issues that are important or interesting. So use that. We know that there are opportunities through cancer networks, other clinical networks to have the conversation. And we've had a clinical forum in operation at system and place level for many years. And we've tried to protect the time for people to get involved in those things. And then if people want to be part of the health inequalities and the equity fellowship, then we protect their time. It's not always straightforward or easy, this stuff. So having the right support and the safe spaces to have the conversation is also incredibly important. So I'll give you an example. prior to the pandemic, and because we're interested in race and the fact that all of the evidence is that our population doesn't get an equal deal and neither do our staff, and being fed up with seeing lots of white faces like mine in meetings, I suggested that we had our whole system leadership executive, every chief executive and partner have a meeting about this and why this was, but I wanted it to be led by people of colour in the system so that we could demonstrate, firstly, they've got loads of really fantastic people with loads of talent, and actually they've got quite a few people operating at senior level. And what we did was that we engineered it so that the race equality networks and individuals interviewed chief executives and asked them really difficult questions. Like, what do you say to someone who says, I'm sick of all the staff from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities getting the training? Where's my training? What do you say to the person who says, from a Black Caribbean background, who says, I'm sick of getting all the training, I'm not the one with the problem? So these are things people say, they just don't say them in meetings or with leaders. So what we did was we got them to do a little film asking those questions of people like me. That's one question each, and then we'd talk about them in the group. And following that, we decided that there was quite a lot for us to do. So we created space with supported OD for our race equality networks right across West Yorkshire to come together about what would you do here to make this better, and what do we need to do? Can we co-produce that? We'll give you the resources to help that. And we had a very honest conversation in the first one of those meetings about how some organisations really didn't support them. And because we've got a distributed peer leadership, we could have that conversation together about that's what they're feeling, how do we make it better? What we then got to was a situation where race equality networks do a shadow board. The shadow board gets all the same papers as the integrated care board. At the integrated care board, they have representation on the board that tells us and gives us advice on what did they decide on the papers that we've seen, and what input would they give us, and insight and intelligence, would they come up with the same decisions, and what different points would they get? It's brilliant, because what it does, it gives you different perspectives, and it gives people the space, and it also gives them the experience. Now, once we got into the pandemic and Public Health England was saying lots more people of colour are at risk of COVID, we were immediately able to say, what advice can you give us about how we make this better? How do we risk assess everybody, and risk assess everybody from Black Caribbean, Black African, Pakistani, Bangladeshi communities first? And then what do we do next? And we ended up commissioning an independent review of all the work we were doing to see if it was sufficient, and it's not. So I think it's a kind of sense of, you go where the energy is, you're very honest about what you are or not aren't doing, you create an infrastructure to support the culture that you want, and then you do some real work. Because if you don't, you might as well not bother.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other questions for Rob? Anything that you'd like to ask? And has anything come through in the chat? I've not had a chance to look at it.
No, no specific ones. One of the ones I thought of though as well, which is if a system, particularly say provision, has the pressure, a national pressure about the urgent care situation and the waiting times and the throughput and the things like that, how would you see and how would you sort of move towards that with an integrated care approach that may get underneath some of it for you? What would your suggestions be around that kind of real pithy problem that we have?
So so what we've had to do, so on occasion, so remember the Elective Recovery Fund, when in its first iteration, one of the things that we have a finance forum, all the directors of finance across the system. We have a very open view on money. Our money's in pretty good shape because of it. Their first principle is this is about quality. So when the pressure came around the Elective Recovery Fund, what the director of finance said was, we don't believe we should be prioritising work on the basis of achieving the intent, the maximising the Elective Recovery Fund. we should be doing work on the basis of clinical need, treating people in order as quickly as we can, and if we've got spare capacity, using it. And as a system, we said, okay, that's great to hear, because that's what we believe clinically as well. But it puts us at risk of not being able to deliver. So we will have the conversation. We will put our plans in which are true and honest and reflect need. We will back the clinical view, we will back the financial view, and then we'll deliver the plans. And looking at some other people's plans, we thought that they didn't look credible. We're doing really well comparatively on elective recovery, and I think that's because we've kept the clinical and financial leaders with us on what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we've had a collective view, if we needed to push back a bit with NHS England, around why where we're getting to with the activity and what the consequences might be and what degree of risk we can carry. But we thought it was much better to carry the small amount of risk that we had than subvert clinical responses. What we then need to do over and above what you as you said, Andy, if you think about the urgent care pressures, the bit of work I described at Mid Yorkshire about who's turning up in the ambulance and why is it the poor people who are turning up and they don't actually need anything afterwards? What's going on there? We're doing that in all trusts, and because we've got the provider collaborative, we can. And because that the urgent emergency care programme is led by one of the coups in one of the hospitals on behalf of everybody with support from us and the clinical forum, we can start to get into that. And if there are difficult messages around housing or bus routes or transport, we can have that conversation too. So it's always, I think, coming back to it's totally legitimate to say, can you improve waiting times? Can you improve A&E performance? That's what the public wants. How you do that is the issue, and not being told how. So I think over time we've managed to retain a sense of credibility, because the regulator might not like the answers sometimes, but they know it's a real one. And it keeps the partners in the partnership knowing it's their work and it's their programme.
Thank you for that, Rob. Got a couple of hands up now. So we've got a couple of minutes left for questions. So if we can go to, is it Hussain Jawad?
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks. It's Jawad Hussain. Thanks, Rob.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. I'm an exec medical director at East Lancs, and I think the benefit that I saw of COVID was that NHS moved away from competition into collaboration mode. And we last so many decades, we've always competed with each other, one organization against the other, primary against secondary care and whatnot. Would be just interested to see how that culture change, which is still ongoing and will take a long time, that you did in your ICB. And again, there are some dynamics at the moment between the PCB and the ICB and all those. And if I'm very candid, I don't think we have established that relationship, which is so essential that we need for delivering the healthcare, because just like yours, you've mentioned, we are in the lowest deciles of all form of outcomes, social care. So just that culture element, please.
Yeah. So firstly by paying attention to it and being very honest. So very early on, we had a piece of development work where we had verbatim theatre. We got somebody in to talk to every chief exec, and they asked them what we're good at, what we're not good at, what would you change if you could? And then they had to play it back to us, but they could only use the words we'd said. And people were very honest. So what came out of that was we were actually really good at some things and we just took it for granted. There were some things that we weren't good at, everybody said in the corridor, that came out. And there were some things that people would change, like if only those acutes wouldn't keep all the money, it'd be fine. Or those laggards, the CCGs, are a nightmare to work with. This kind of language came out, and everyone sat there and went, all right, okay, we've got to stop this, haven't we? We then agreed status quo is not an option. Then we did things like, let's change the incentives. Let's be honest about risk and money. Stop asking people if they can achieve a target, but ask them what degree of risk are they carrying in doing so and what degree of efficiency. Let's have a look at that, and then let's equal it out a bit. Let's get rid of PBR and go for aligned incentive contracts. So we had a bit of a cultural piece, and then we took away some of the drivers of competition. And I think we desperately paid attention to the leadership. And because we were doing real work all of the time, we started to see real benefits for everybody. So yes, we got our new mental health unit built, we got the money for it, and we got it built. And then one of the hospitals got its money because we all backed it. And then Leeds got its money because we all backed it. We reconfigured services for stroke, and actually there weren't any losers. We got the bits changed that we needed changing. So people started to see that this collaboration was a better answer, and they quite liked it. So it was making a difference, I think, paying attention to the things that matter and taking away some of the incentives that drive competition. But it takes constant work.
Fantastic, Rob. Susie, do you think it's worth using the Menti to just gather views and comments and questions on screen, or would you like to for just in a couple of minutes handle the hands up by Jennifer?
I think it'd be probably easy if Jennifer, if Rob, have you got time? Because I know you were quite limited on your time.
I've
got another 5 minutes.
Yeah, I've got another 5 minutes. That's fine. I can see Claire Fuller, and she'll be thinking, "Is that Webster's using up all my time again?" Is
that okay? We go another 5 minutes.
It's always lovely to listen to Rob. He's so calm and wise, and you'll get the contrast when I come on in a bit. So stick with Rob as long as you can.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Rob. Okay, Jennifer, would you mind asking your question, and it'll be our last one. But if there's any further questions, please pop them in the chat, and we will endeavour to get those answered after today.
Hi, Rob. My name is Jen Deeney, and I'm head of neonatal services at Liverpool Women's and work across the Liverpool Neonatal Partnership. I suppose my question comes back to working in a real niche speciality, and the ICB is so huge. How, and with recovery pressures and waiting times and everything else, how as leaders do you not lose us in that system? How do you make sure that we get exactly what everybody else gets? Because I think that's a scary part for a lot of neonatal units, is where we fit within this, and how we work within the ICBs, and how we don't get lost.
Yeah. So I had the pleasure of going to Liverpool Women's a few years ago, and one of the things I'll never forget is the stillborn wards and the tiny cots. It's absolutely brilliant. You know, really fantastic to see the care and attention that's paid to people who are grieving. I thought it was wonderful. So I think the general point I'll make, because it's not just neonates, is it, and niche specialties. It's how do you make it relevant to people? And I think I'll go back to where I started. You make it relevant because it's relevant when it has to be, and they feel part of something. So what we're trying to say in West Yorkshire is this is a partnership of partners, and actually the work gets done at the right level where it needs to get done. And if you can have an organizational or institutional solution or a home-based solution, then do. If you need to do something collectively in a place, then do. If you need to do something in West Yorkshire, then do. But that kind of sense of sharing good practice, addressing wicked issues or matters of scale. So you might be niche, or you might be so specialist that you can only organise it at that level. I always say you don't want your double hand transplant at Dewsbury District Hospital. Yeah. You're going to go and have it at Leeds Teaching, because that's the only place that does it, I think, maybe in the country. Certainly they're the first one in the world. So if you're one of those niche specialties that's going to be kind of special for the ICB, it's making sure that that's within the framework of what it does, and that the ICB is, in our case, most of it's done by other people. It's been done by the places. They're getting on with the issues. If it is a truly specialist service, then we're paying attention to that because that's our job. Generally, though, I think if you can feel connected to something and subsidiarity applies, that'll do. You just need to understand it's a partnership. You're in it. For neonates maternity, obviously that's at the moment it's such a fundamental part of safety considerations and service considerations and the local maternity systems. From the beginning, we've said that the LMS maternity newborns is all part of the ICB. It's all part of the ICS. It's a collaborative that's working, and we need to make sure that people feel supported to deliver really great practice, and that where there's good practice, it's shared and so on. So I guess that's what I would say. Generally, we have to operate on the principle of subsidiarity. If it's a specialist service, it's our job to work with you to deliver it. If it's a service that's of interest and a priority, then you feel supported to connect good practice and sort out wicked issues together.
Lovely, thank you, Rob.
Thank you everyone for your questions. It's been a really, really interesting session. Thank you so much, Rob, for giving us your insight and your expertise and your experience. It's been fabulous. And I'm sure that when we get the recording out, we'll probably get some more queries coming through. So thank you. Anything else you'd like to leave us as a lasting thought before we move on?
If you want to have more information about the Race Equality Commission, if you want to look at the Health Inequalities Academy, the Health Inequalities Networks, all the work we're doing on suicide prevention, all the work we're doing on trauma-informed systems and so on, it's all available on the website. There's loads of fantastic material there, including the time Claire came to talk to us about race equality, for example, which was brilliant. So you use that, steal it. We just say pinch with pride and do it better.
Oh, thanks, Rob.
All right.
Thank you for sparing the time today and coming along and taking all those questions as well. If we get any pithy questions, can we pass them on to you for a comment back?
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. Really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all. Take care.
Welcome, Claire.
Hello.
Let's move on. We're running a little bit 5-6 minutes late. Claire brings a primary care perspective now, I think. Claire Fuller is a GP and CEO at Surrey Heartlands Health and Care Partnership. She'd been awarded the HSJ Clinical Leader of the Year this summer, published the Impactful Fuller Stocktake as well nationally. Claire is an exceptional leader. She has spent her career championing improvements in population health and reducing health inequalities, whose insight will, I'm sure this will, what you're going to say will provoke questions, and particularly also, as you know, the primary care side of things and how that plays such an important part in this new integrated care agenda, really.
Brilliant. Do you want me to do talking then, Andy?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Can't you? And then if it's okay, we've got some questions at the end.
Yeah.
And then we've got this piece of software Menti as well that we can use to collect people's comments.
No, absolutely. Well, listen, it's always hard to follow Rob Webster because he's just amazing. So I could sit and listen to Rob. Well, you always learn something every time. Every time I hear Rob speak, I learn something, and I go in, I steal something, and I just think he's incredible. So always very hard to follow him, but I think we're very different. So you will probably get something different from this. So although effectively we have the same job. So I'm the Chief Executive of Surrey Heartlands ICS, but I'm also a GP. And I have been a GP for longer than I haven't been a GP, which is an incredibly long time. What I thought I'd talk to you today about was a little bit about the stock take that I undertook earlier this year for Amanda Pritchard, which was looking at primary care within systems. So what's working, why it's working, and how you could replicate it. And Amanda asked me to write a short report describing the current situation and then to make some recommendations. And the thing that I was one of the things I was proud of with the report, because I was very proud of a lot of it, was actually the fact that all 42 ICS chief executives signed a letter to Amanda Pritchard endorsing the report, which is incredibly powerful, because it actually means then that every single system in Epsom, that's where I used to live, in England, will be looking at the report, will be taking the recommendations through their board, and will be looking at implementation. But also what was different and unusual was not only did we have a letter signed by all 42 ICS chief execs, which had never happened, we also put an ask back into the centre. So we said, right, we can do these bits, but we need to do that. We need you to do this. And that's been the little bit I think that may have that we're waiting to get a response back. And we had the first implementation board yesterday. So I took on the commission, didn't quite realise what it was going to be like, and it was quite a whirlwind 6 months. So during the 6 months I was doing the piece of work, we had the British Social Attitude Survey and the GP survey, both that showed for the first time that the public were less satisfied with the NHS than they were satisfied, and also that there had been a significant drop in satisfaction, particularly with GPs, which was the first time that had happened. So previously, when we'd had the British Social Attitude Survey, we'd got down to where the dentists were and where waiting for outpatients were, whereas previously as GPs we'd always been sort of 10-15% up above that. So that was quite a shock to the sector and the profession. And then coupled with that, you then would have seen the rise in political interest across a number of our more recent health secretaries. And a sustained media campaign about how do you get to see, because anybody's seen where are all the GPs gone, which has had a catastrophic impact upon the profession. So ask the question. So I kicked off doing the report by, the report was intended for my peer group, so Rob and I's 40 other peers. So I started off by I did a speed dating session and spoke to all 42 across, I think it was across 2 days, which was quite extraordinary because of the diversity of backgrounds. So if you think Rob and I, how diverse we are in terms of our background, well, that's nothing, there are people from a commercial background, people from voluntary sector background, local authority. There was a man that was from New Zealand, that was over in New Zealand running a water company. There is such diversity and depth of leadership and experience amongst our peer group that is quite extraordinary. But the thing that was what I did was ask them to tell me what they're proud of, and then also what they wanted help with. And the two themes that came through were access and continuity. And access and continuity were the two themes that came out. So from the chief execs, from the profession and from the public. So and we see this play out, and at the moment the current system is not set up to handle that tension between those two bits. So we'll all have experienced the 8 a.m. scramble either for ourselves or for our families. You need an appointment and you can't get through, phone back at 2, all the appointments are gone. And what you then get is you get people either choosing to wait and make an appointment a number of weeks in advance because they want to see somebody that knows them, that understands their 10 long-term conditions and the fact that they live with a partner with dementia, and have to look after the toddler on a Tuesday and a cat on a Thursday, and actually they can't go into hospital because who'd look after the cat and the toddler, versus I need to be seen now, I'm really worried about my baby with a temperature of 41, or I've got a weird rash, can I go and visit my niece who's having treatment for breast cancer? So you forego, for the immediacy of the need, people are choosing to forego the continuity, but that is not always the right decision. So in the report, what we did is talk about, so how do we do this better? And what we talk about is we describe an evolution of primary care networks, which at their best can help do this and do help do this, into integrated neighbourhood teams. And primary care networks, bell curve seems to be the thing of the moment, doesn't it? We always have a buzz phrase, don't we, going on at the moment, and it seems like everybody's talking about a bell curve. So of course you get a bell curve of primary care networks. And at their best, they're already integrated neighbourhood teams. But where it doesn't work, it's where you have a contract held between NHS England and an individual practice that brings 2 hours of paramedics or 3 hours of a pharmacist into an individual practice that actually does nothing to improve patient care and probably increases the workload within the practice if they can find somewhere for them to sit because of the underlying estates issues that's going on. So we talk about describing how primary care networks can evolve into integrated neighbourhood teams to wrap around practices, because the important thing about primary care is the continuity of care that we provide to people. I think to be honest, the important thing about the NHS is the continuity of care to patients and the continuity within teams. There's such strong evidence, isn't there, showing the improved outcomes through continuity. We know that if the same person tells you to stop smoking, you will stop smoking on 2 or 3 earlier interventions than if it's just random people or if you read it. That personal connection is incredibly valuable, and those that are GPs on the call will be really familiar with, when patients come in and see us and they come in and they'll test us out. You'll come in and you talk about your tennis elbow and you'll go and you have the consultation and you go, well, yes, you've got tennis elbow, haven't you? And you can have an injection, you can have some physio, we could do nothing. And in 6 months, it'll all be the same. And then they get up and go, thank you very much. And they get up and they put their hand on the door and they go, and while I'm here, could I just ask you about? And of course, the while I'm here is why they've come in the first place. And if you don't create the relationships or the space for the while I'm here conversations, we create a transactional and overly medicalised NHS, and it is general practice, and I'm specifically talking about general practice here and not primary care, but it is that general practice relationship of continuity that actually keeps the show on the road. So I'm going to give you my favourite. I always have a favourite statistic. My favourite statistic at the moment is, so we've taken our stock take plans through our board. And the stocktake talks about integrated neighbourhood teams looking through 3 lenses. One, how you do access. So on the day, integrated urgent care, what people can access from their home, in their neighbourhood, in their place and in the system. How you do complex and chronic care for those people that have the most contact. And then how you improve prevention, how you improve health inequalities within communities, building on the vaccine work. But if you put just to touch on the building teams around the most complex patients. So one of the areas in Surrey, so East Surrey, which is so we are the most affluent ICS in the country, and I have got nobody in decile 1, and I've got we are an affluent area, which brings different challenges in that I've got an average life expectancy in Yorkshire of 92 years. It is a different set of problems to deal with, but nonetheless complex. So East Surrey, moderately affluent, population of 225,000 as a place. They looked at their moderate to high users of healthcare, and they identified 2/3 of that population that were moderate to high users, so a population of 60,000. They then looked at the top 1%. So they looked at 600 people in detail and looked at how many health and care contacts they'd had. So they found that 100 people over the last year had 1,900 A&E attendances. Okay, so they were going more than 3 times a year to A&E. They also found that they'd had 450 outpatient appointments and 400 admissions between them. Okay, so they've nearly all been in hospital. They've been to A&E 3 times, and they nearly all have been at least once to outpatients. But the thing I'm going to pick on you, Andy, just to warn you, right? How many GP contacts do you think they had during the same time frame? So 1,900 A&E attendances, 450 outpatients, and 400 admissions. How many GP contacts do you think they had in that year? 600 people.
600 people.
Yeah. Any GPs on the call? Whenever go. If we've got any GPs on.
I think it was quite. I would have assumed it was pretty high, actually. But
so how many is pretty high? So if it's 1,800 A&E attendances, how many GP contacts do you think?
As a guess, I'd say what for that. If it's 1,800, probably 3,000. Right,
we've got 6,000. David Davis from Sussex ICB. What are you doing on this one, David Davis from Sussex ICB? I've just been talking to the very lovely Adam Doyle. He's just going, can I come and listen? I was like, no, you've heard me too many times. Any advance on 6,000? Right, okay, so ready for this. So the great, yeah, all right, funny. So the answer to this question is, remember, 600 people, 1,900 A&E attendances, 450 outpatients, 400 admissions. It's 54,000 GP contacts over the year. So if you want to understand why GPs are leaving, if you want to understand why as a profession we are on our knees, I'll just give you 54,000. So every single time a GP hears, what more can general practice do to protect secondary care, you can understand why there is this gulf that has arisen between primary and secondary care. It's twice a week. And actually, when you talk to GPs, sort of go, well, yeah, it'd be about twice a week, won't it? It's not unusual for people to come in twice a week. So when people say they can't get in, there's a reason for that. We've got a diminishing workforce that are seeing extraordinary amounts of work. So we talk about creating these neighbourhood teams to put a team around those 600 people, because actually, if you had somebody phoning them twice a week to go, look, have you got your appointments? Have you got your, where are you? You would free up inordinate amounts of actual GP times to work in different ways. And in terms of doing the integrated urgent care, we talk about GPs leading teams. It's working across a primary care network footprint, but dealing with the additional roles. So working and leading a team of nurse practitioners, of first contact physios, of pharmacists and of paramedics. And then the thing that will happen around those most complex, it will be a team from multiple organisations. So you'll bring in people from community teams, from mental health teams, from secondary care, to bring in that secondary care expertise rather than having people going to multiple outpatient appointments. Let's just bring that expertise in a way that works for people, because quite often when you've got 10 plus long-term conditions, the decision making you need is really complex. And actually it'll be, well, if I stick up this drug, it's going to throw off my renal function. And actually you kind of want to have those people in the room at the same time. So very hard to organise, but if we can do it and if we get it right, imagine the impact that will have on people's lives. It will take years of waiting and uncertainty, and actually will then be delivering truly personalised care. So what we've talked about doing is working out the lead, because there will be a lead clinician within those for those most complex. When we looked at this 600 in East Surrey, most of them were over 80% were over 80. So again, you have a geriatrician, you have frailty lead, but there were 10% of them were complex children. So again, you'd have a pediatric, and then another 5% really were complex mental health needs. So again, you can see you would have MDTs led by different people bringing in expertise from other specialties, but those teams will need to involve voluntary sectors, adult social care, children's services, secondary care consultants working in a different way. So in terms of job plans, actually being aligned to neighbourhood teams to actually be able to have time to have those conversations in a more meaningful way. So that all sounds marvellous, doesn't it? And we'd all love to work like that, but the environment is not set up to do it. And that was why the letter from the 42 is so important, because it means that the ICSs are taking responsibility to create the right environment. And that means estates. So again, any GPs on the call, we've all GPs have got a story about when we did the clinic, when you did a surgery from a cupboard, was at my practice, if we're all in and there's nobody on holiday, I'm in the cupboard because I do the least number of sessions, which means I've got no couch, I've got a computer and a desk and just about a chair. So if I've got to examine someone, I've got to wait for a colleague to finish to go, do you mind if I just pop Mrs. So-and-so in and up on the couch and bring them out? A lot of people have to consult in rooms upstairs without disabled access, and again, you have to wait to come down to see people that can't go up the stairs. Estates in general practice have been willfully neglected, because I think people don't understand them, and often the way the NHS capital works, we get money at the last minute, and general practice as small businesses is not set up to mobilise in time to do that. So it is the larger organisations that receive the capital. So in the report, we ask for estate strategies that come bottom up, that not only talk about NHS estate, but talk about one public estate, but also talk about making better use of commercial sector. Why are we not in the high street? Why are we not increasing the footfall and putting services where it works for people rather than where it works for us? So estates, data and digital. So we've done a massive digital change, haven't we? But we still haven't got records that all of us can see. We still haven't got records that patients can see. We still can't alter appointments without having to phone up. You still, there are real customer-facing things that we just don't do well that create work. So I think I used to do a surgery on a Monday, and so much of it would be around. I was seen in A&E over the weekend, and they told me to do this, and it'd be, well, I haven't got discharge summary, but I suspect it was that. We could make this so much easier for all of us. And in the hospital, if you can see the blood tests that have happened, the investigations that have happened, the referrals that are out there already, if we had one record that the patients could see, that was interactive, that we could all see, that we didn't have to write letters to each other, we could just look at the notes, think how much easier that would be. And then there is workforce and leadership. So there are just not enough GPs. There are not enough of any of us, are there, to do this? So what we need to do is reduce the duplication, reduce the things that do not add value, and work together to deal with the demand as best we can, while we create a better environment that people want to come and work in and don't want to leave. And there are a number of things we need to sort out. And the other bit really is the leadership piece as well. So there is not a recognised leadership route for people in primary care. So you might just about get something for GPs. And, because of the benefit of 2 changes in Health and Social Care Act, I did the CCG route, CCG Chair, Accountable Officer, and then STP, and then ICS. But, that's relied upon 2 Health and Care Acts, which you would hope people wouldn't have to get to a chief exec position as a GP. But what about everybody else out there? So receptionists in practices have more contacts with the public than anybody else in the NHS, yet they are not. If you think about it, and actually, if you ever sit in a GP receptionist, you will hear them. They'll take the calls and they'll go, "Oh yeah, no, I'll get the doctor to phone you back." Oh no, you better go to A&E. They are making more decisions about where patients go than any of us. They have very little training. They're probably on the lowest wages. They're not recognised by the people plan, and there's absolutely no career structure. So until we start valuing these really high patient contact roles and put in place some clinical governance and some training, we really don't stand a chance of creating a different environment. So we've got a fabulous story I heard last week of a woman locally in Northwest Surrey who, school leaver, went straight in as a GP receptionist. For many reasons. So just went in, and when she was there, she learned how to do a bit of phlebotomy, she learned how to do ECGs, she started doing a few bits and bobs. Anyway, 10 years later, she's gone back in as a GP into that very same practice. So if we can start describing career trajectories for people that actually work in a way of bolting on skills, and if you can go from just learning the odd skills. I think we focus an awful lot in terms of our workforce planning on, and there's an awful lot of working at the top of our license. Actually, if we can, there are real precise skills that we could teach people. And, you know, if you could teach the physio to put eye drops in, or if you could get the OT to check someone's doing their physio properly, you have your host profession, but actually there are real core skills that would reduce the number of people that need to go in. And I think we need to get better about that generalisation, but understanding that that means different training requirements and different needs. So the right environment, so it's estates, it's workforce leadership, it's data and digital. And then my final point really is, at the same time as writing the report, we commissioned the King's Fund to do a literature search about how you bring about change in primary care. And they did a global literature search, and it won't surprise many of you to hear that in England, we rely more heavily upon centralised financial incentives to drive change than in anywhere in the world. And actually, there's very little evidence that it works. It certainly drives up activity, but it doesn't drive up sustainable improvement in outcomes. And the places that do this successfully create teams with clearly defined remits, give them data, and leave them alone. So it's the shift to working in a high trust environment, and it's giving data to clinicians and leaving them alone. We all know, you know, if you give us a problem to solve, it's COVID, isn't it? Give us a problem to solve, we'll get on and we will do it. But we need to shift to working in that high trust environment. But I think the interesting bit is about that teams have got a clear remit, so which comes back down to what the stock take, although it started off being about primary care, the further away I've got from it, the more I realise actually it's about system working. And it's about how we move from siloed programs. You know, we get initiatives coming out from the centre for virtual wards or for discharge or for, but actually we're still talking about the same population in a geography, and we need to deliver the response and look after those people together, which is hard, and it's a massive clinical leadership job to deliver it. Andy, I'll stop doing the talking now.
That's fantastic. You spoke very quickly as well, which is very impressive. Before Susie takes over with the questions, I'd just like to make a comment that what we've just heard with Rob and you is, you know, moving between the big picture strategy stuff that you've got to try and do down to the realism of the clinical and care people on the ground, overwhelmed and swamped with activity that sometimes is generated by our attempts to fix it in silos rather than fix it as a collective. So for me, the integration opportunity is about freeing those people up around, say, place, or even smaller than place sometimes, to get those solutions, whether it be primary care, community, mental health, secondary care provision, urgent care pathways, how we get them to sort out the nitty-gritty of what is the issues in their local patch and how they can do it more effectively.
Completely agree, Randy.
And for those of you that can stay to the digital action learning sets at the end, that is what they're about. Understanding in your patch your relative problems between organisations, understanding each other's issues and pressures, and looking to the new system that we're trying to develop with integrated care boards and steering communities in place and neighbourhoods. How do you say to them, these are the kind of things we need to do to deliver the outcomes for that population? Sorry about that. I just thought I'd jump in because what you were saying just hit the nail on the head in real terms. Susie, do you want to just quickly pick up on any Mentio questions?
Yeah, great. Put your hand up if you've got a question specifically for Claire. Oh, we've got something here from David Holden. I'll read out, David, if you want to add anything, just pop your hand up. So probably a statement rather than a question, but there's been a noticeable change to central national directive and programmes, which is understandable during COVID, but has continued and stifles exactly what you've been talking about. This may also be because of the immaturity of ICBs also, but completely agree with most of the points you make. So thank you for that, Dave. Just while you're having a little think, Claire, from your perspective, then obviously as a clinical leadership network, really keen to think about how we support the development of leaders across the whole health and social care. What would you want to see in place to ensure that leaders are identified and developed and have access to that development opportunity across general practice and dentistry, pharmacy, optometry and wider. What sort of things would you think would be a priority for supporting that leadership development?
So the fundamental bit is protected time, isn't it? And understanding that when you work in somewhere like community pharmacy or optom in general practice, you are self-employed. And actually, if you're going to go away and do a development bit, you'll either lose income or you'll have to get a locum in. So fundamentally, it is different. And people, moan about it or go, why should we have to pay GPs or dentists or anybody else? Because it is different. And we do need those other voices. So I think it is making sure people have got enough protected time. It's making sure that we are as inclusive as possible. And I would cover the non-professional roles as well. But we've got a program in place called the so we started off, the first program I did when I started back as a CCG chair was we did a program just for GPs, which was really, I'd suddenly realised my peer group were, we didn't know, it was when we started up CCGs, we really didn't know very much. And we did like this 3-day taster leadership thing. That day one was, this is your NHS, and explained, in these days, NHSE, NHSI, all the bits of how it all kind of worked. Then we did a this is your CCG, and then we did like a 360 for them for leadership stuff, and then we made it about a leading an improvement project either within their locality or within their practice, but actually made it about doing something, and that worked really well. It was not just esoteric disconnected learning. It was by actually driving improvement. And our current program is called the Surrey 500s, that we're on about cohort, I think we're about Surrey 800 now, which has been across each of the places, 100 people going through at a time from multiple organisations, and each one gets into a different learning set, and they all pick a problem that they're going to solve. So I would say, the most beneficial leadership and development has always come through solving a problem that people are united on, that's real. I think there is some stuff actually about building a network and some safe space that's outside of your system. And some of my closest friends have come from leadership programs I've done over the years. There is something, leadership can be quite a lonely place, particularly if you're doing a lot of change. It's quite useful to have somebody in another part of the world to go, oh my word, we've done this, is it me? Just that sort of safe space out of your bit. So I think there is a role for a broader network that's outside your workplace. But I think your richest learning comes from doing locally, so you can measure the impact and you can watch it.
Absolutely. And that's where the synergy between the Surrey 500/800 and the 17 years of the NHS Clinical Leaders Network across the country at its heyday.
Yeah.
About exactly that.
Yeah.
And providing them with knowledge and information so that they got the picture, but allowing them to look at the solution finding and the blockers and the opportunities to achieve that, and how you go about sharing experience to unblock the blocks.
Yeah. And it's the stuff that goes wrong, isn't it? It's always the richest learning. Well, I'm not going to do it that way. Not going to do it that way again.
That's great. Susie, we're 5 minutes late. So what do you want to do? Do you want to take another one?
If we just go to David, and then we'll hand over to our final speaker of the day, if that's okay. So David, a question for Claire?
Yeah, sorry, apologies for the kindred spirit. A GP myself.
Very good.
I wasn't brave enough to speculate in the.
What would you guess though, David? What would you guess?
I would have gone for more than 6,000.
Yeah, but not 54 though. It's shocking, isn't it? No, it's
54.
shocking.
Yeah. No, although it feels like I appreciate the sentiment. I know what it feels like. I guess my question really is about neighbourhood teams and what your thoughts are, I suppose, on the kind of ideas that they come up with, because it probably links to what I put in the chat there. At the moment, partly because of the landscape that we find ourselves in, we've got a massive pile of energy around integrated teams and spaces, and we've been doing my stomping ground is Cheshire East, and we've been doing integrated working for a while and trying at it in various guises. But actually what we find a challenge as much as anything else is connecting resource funding and like-mindedness to good clinical ideas. So what you find is it's easy to find money if you follow a national program. But actually those are the things that don't work where we are. And actually if you're not following a national program, actually releasing time and that's and energy and system backing towards things like that are actually a real challenge. And I just thought I was just wondering about how you enable that space, you know, enabling the creativity and the innovation, I suppose, around those. Because at the moment it feels like we're setting the teams up, and then we're saying they come up with the idea, and we say thanks for telling us, but
you can't do that. You got to do this.
Can't
Yeah.
do it, so carry on.
So yeah, no, it's so there's a degree of creativity. So the one good thing is actually, you know, the stock-take implementation will, well, it's a good and a bad thing, isn't it? Will become a national thing. We had the first, you know, implementation board, and all the ICSs will need to self-assess against their delivery of integrated neighbourhood teams. So suddenly, if you're on a regional and a national treadmill, then there will suddenly become a lot more interest, which is double-edged, isn't it? Because actually I think the being under the radar stuff is where the more creative stuff happens. How we've done it locally is we've probably been a little bit creative about how we've described our delivery of some of the national programmes. And please don't tweet me and quote me on it, but it's sort of, you know, the discharge work, or the virtual wards, or the even sort of, you know, some of the ERF type stuff. It's the how you combine that, actually, because the neighbourhood teams and the place teams becomes how you deliver your business. And actually what you then do is each time you get another national programme, you think, well, how does that relate to the place or the neighbourhood team? And then actually then you've got the funding and you've got the interest, and it's just sort of slightly flipping it on its head. So I would but because of the reporting ask, and it's because of the political pressure. So I'd never been in this whole, you know, world of being close to all of the, you know, the fancy stuff, and the pressure from government is extraordinary. And I think I was really naive about that. You know, every time we as an the NHS gets money, it comes with an ask. And so unless NHS England can demonstrate that they've done something with that money, we're not there, you know, they don't get any more. So it's we need to try to help them to make sure we keep getting money, but we may need to deliver it in a way that works for our population. But I have thought more kindly upon them. I think it's incredibly hard, the job they do.
I appreciate that, and I have that shared understanding. I think it's more about creating the conditions to
support
it. And like I say, it's not setting people up to fail, I suppose, and losing that dynamic once you set it up. So thank you very much.
That's great, Claire and David. That, you know, that's super real stuff, isn't it? It really is. I mean, Claire, you've been brilliant. It's very kind of you to give you time, and you and Rob have given this big picture, and also highlighted the complexity of the problem. So because a lot of these people, it will be mind-boggling, difficult. But I'd encourage everybody to take on what board you said and move forward and listen to Maria Smith and the opportunities for supporting leadership development and improvement. And then when we get into the action learning sets, get down to the real nitty-gritty of what it is that David's talking about, but reflect on what's been said about the bigger picture. And we can begin that process. And of course, these action learning sets, Claire, are going to be every 2 months across the Northwest, and we will build and we'll feed it with information and stuff like that to try and help these guys and ladies develop integrated approaches that begin to problem solve on place and neighbourhood.
Very good. Thank you all very much indeed. It's lovely to see you. Andy, please share my email and stuff if people want to get in touch. I'm really happy to help if I can.
It's really good of you. Thanks for joining us today.
No, not at all. Love to see you all. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Super, everybody. About 5 minutes late, I realised that is pretty heavy stuff that we've just heard about in the bigger strategic picture as well. But it shows some of the complexities, but I'm sure you all feel it as clinical leaders from various specialisms and various organisations, the bits that are close to you, that touch you from what they've said. Now, luckily, we've now got Maria Smith, who's joined us in my bottom left-hand corner, Maria, who has been working with NHSE on how you work with professional clinical and care leadership, and how the system using the 42 ICSs supports those people to develop and get the right environments to do the kind of things that Claire and Rob Webster were talking about and that David Holden was just mentioning. I've got a little bit of resume here about you, Maria, if I could just pull it up just a second. Maria is the Senior Programme Lead in the National System Transformation Team at NHS England, leading on the Clinical and Care Professional Leadership Framework. She has mobilised a national community of practice to help systems across England share information and develop their clinical and care leaders, as well as providing a national support package for ICS areas, which I think everybody will be interested in hearing about. We are really excited to hear all about the work that she has been leading on, and the CLN has always and will continue to support the work that she's doing because it's so incredibly valuable and offers real tangible things to communities that they can draw on. So Maria, welcome, and you know, I'm really looking forward to hear what you've got to say to this group of clinical and care leaders.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for having me along. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and I'll try to get you a little bit of time back as well if I can at all. So hopefully you can see that. Hi everybody, as Andy's just described, I'm part of the National System Transformation team and have the absolute pleasure of supporting implementation of the clinical and care professional leadership guidance. And I wasn't able to join for Rob's bit, but did just listen with interest to everything that Claire described, and was really pleased actually with the level of congruence between the sort of messages that she's described and what I'm going to talk to you about now. So hopefully that ties together quite nicely in terms of this being a push that we can actually utilise to make some of those changes happen over the coming period. So a little bit of context then. So this comes from the guidance that was published back in September, along with all of the guidance that was coming thick and fast in terms of establishing ICSs or ICBs in the summer of this year. This clinical and care professional leadership guidance was co-developed with 2,500 clinical and care professionals up and down the country from systems and regions. And we asked those people, what would good clinical and care professional leadership look like in the new world as we approach integrated care? What does it need to look like to be effective, to be distributed, to be integrated? And that was what the finishing guidance describes. So it tries to do so in a very permissive way. So it doesn't tell us what we need to do or what systems need to do. What it describes is 5 guiding design principles, and they are detailed, they are articulated in terms of what good looks like. So there's nothing there in terms of how we go about reaching those goals, because I think it's really important that how systems go about that is building on the good stuff that they've been doing before, and is therefore kind of personalised to themselves. I think, you know, I think it's fascinating, isn't it, that we've got conversations from kind of the northeast, the northwest, and the southeast all at once, and all the different complexities that those systems are facing and dealing with. So it's important that we have that bespoke approach. The guidance set out, building on the white paper and the commitment to clinical leadership being key to integrated care, and asked each system to produce a framework, which they had to do as part of the establishment process. So there are 42 frameworks in existence now that aims to describe how each system will approach putting into practice the guidance, and I'll get to what that looks like in a moment. And also how they will ensure that the fullest range of clinical and care professionals are involved in all aspects of ICS decision making going forward, and that they are involving all professional clinical and care leaders in their vision and purpose and work of the ICS. So these are the 5 principles, and hopefully, as you see straight away, they should start to demonstrate or pick up on some of the points that Claire was making previously. So the first one is about integrating clinical and care professionals in all decision making at every layer of the ICS. So it's about having a distributed leadership model, and in making sure that all the voices are heard in terms of horizontal and vertical communication routes. Based on, so that the decisions made at system are able to be at system level, are able to be completely informed by what's happening in neighbourhoods and on the ground, so that they can make decisions at that system level that offer the opportunity to progress autonomy and responsiveness at that neighbourhood and place level where they're required. That's the kind of the governance one, which is tends to be where people kind of focus and start, which is a great start. However, Principle 2 comes in to describe how governance and structure alone aren't enough. What the legislative changes certainly aren't enough on their own. In addition to that, what we need is the opportunity to collaborate around shared challenges and shared issues. And that's some of the stuff that Claire's just been talking about, isn't it, as well? So second one is creating a culture of shared learning, collaboration and innovation. So psychological safety, which has also been touched on in the previous section, in terms of the richness comes from when we fail at something, and being okay to fail, and being understanding the value of not succeeding, and being able to take the learning points from that collectively and move on to try something else based on that learning is an incredibly important part of learning systems that we're hoping to see in the future. It is also incredibly ambitious in terms of where we're starting from, and the prevailing culture and behaviours that we experience in clinical and care systems, or health and care systems, I should say, that are all there for good and valid reasons. So it's understanding sort of where we're starting from and how we might move to that future state. That's something I should have mentioned previously as well, really, because we took those 2,500 people and we asked them, what should it look like? The vision that I'm describing to you now that's set out in the guidance is really quite far from the traditional and what you might be experiencing and observing in the systems that you're coming from at the moment. And I kind of make no apology for that, on the basis that we ask system colleagues what we should have, not what we do have currently. But we do absolutely acknowledge that this is a multi-year programme in terms of making this vision fully come to life and be fully realised, and also on the basis that a true learning system is never actually finished, is it? So in that sense, it's a piece of work that won't ever actually be done, unfortunately. But again, hopefully, as you've just been talking about national programmes and another national programme, this is something that should be an enabler to all of the other programmes of work that you are delivering, and it'd be great to have continue the conversation about that once I've described it a little bit more. So psychological safety, key, as is the opportunities to collaborate around shared problems. So we're starting to build in now then that infrastructure that supports a system first response. So a system first thinking, completely different mindset to sort of previous operational and leadership roles and headspace, if you like. So how can we move to a place where people really understand where their colleagues are coming from across sectoral and professional boundaries? How do they understand the system issue and understand their part as a collective in terms of that system response to that? And they can only do that if they're given the opportunity to learn and to problem solve together as that kind of MDT approach across the system. Number 3 is, for me, the values commitment from the system. So again, this was described quite a lot in terms of protected time, and the opportunity to build relationships is absolutely key to this. So this one came directly from clinicians specifically telling us through the engagement exercise that clinical engagement and clinical involvement in decision making in kind of the old world, or the world that they were currently inhabited, was kind of attack onto their day job. It was 10 minutes at the end. It was a clinical reference group to sign something off, a fait accompli that had already been worked up somewhere else and just brought along at the last stage to get sign off before we can go ahead and implement. So this principle is all about bringing clinicians in and care professionals right in at the beginning of those processes, where we're first starting to establish what the issue is, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and bringing in that expertise from the front line and throughout the system to be able to articulate that as a system and as a multidisciplinary team representing the system workforce that are experiencing that. It's about making sure that we have the right resources in place to enable clinical leaders to fulfil their leadership duties. So that includes time to deliver it. It can't be a tack onto a day job if we expect it to be a good quality result and for our workforce to be well and happy. And it's also a lot about, so we talked about digital and data on the last one as well. So a big part of this is, I think I was trying to remember Claire's quote so that I could say it again, and I can't recall now, but it's something along the lines of just give a clinician the data and let them get on with it. Absolutely, that's what this principle is trying to achieve, although it's slightly different in the sense of giving the clinician the data and leaving them to get on with it implies that they know they're fully au fait with what to do with that data, what it means, how to interpret it, how to manipulate it to understand what they want to understand based on their experiences and the clinical insight that they're bringing to the picture. And that's not necessarily the case. So this principle goes one further to say, give them access to the data, but also to the data analysts. It's about that mutual respect across clinical and non-clinical specialisms, and that mutual conversation, bringing those two elements together to produce a better result for system and public. 4 and 5 are about development and pipeline planning. So number 4 is about developing a leadership opportunities, for clinical and care professionals to learn together, building on the clinical and care expertise that they bring into the role. So what are they bringing in already? Moving away from the kind of sheep dip approach that we've seen before in some places, where the assumption is that everybody kind of starts at the same place and ends at the same place. This is about building on what they already have and what they're bringing, appreciating the diversity that will bring as a group, and allowing clinical and non-clinical colleagues to learn together about what system leadership is, appreciating that system leadership is a different skill set and a different mindset to traditional organisational leadership, for example. And number 5 is about quality and diversity in 2 senses. So one, very importantly, of course, is demographically making sure that our leadership represents the population that it serves, and making sure that we have recruitment processes and systems in place that enable that to happen. But then equally, it's about equality and diversity of professional groups as well. So widening the professional pool of future leaders, so that it's not just confined to a couple of specialisms, that actually we've got a broad range of clinical and care professions in those leadership roles, moving where we can to professionally agnostic approaches to some leadership roles where that's appropriate, where the role isn't necessarily directly linked, like medical director, for example. You need to be a medic to be in that role, but where that's not the case, what's the opportunities to broaden those the range of clinicians or care professionals that we might want to see in there. And also identifying people earlier in their career and in those roles that we wouldn't necessarily associate traditionally with the trajectory to leadership. So trying to find people early and develop them with the right experience and skill set to manage in a leadership role across the system in the future. This is just a couple of bits that I've pulled out from various frameworks and some of the work that's happening in systems already, that we're working with, just to kind of show some of the engagement work that's happening. There's a huge amount of engagement work and really honest, vulnerable questions being asked of their clinical and care professionals across the system to really want to understand what the reality is and how they're experiencing that. I should say at this point as well that I've been really enthused by the passion and dedication from all of the systems that I've worked with to date on this agenda. Do not underestimate everything that Claire's just outlined and everything that systems are on a whole dealing with at the moment in terms of kind of unprecedented organisational and operational pressures, but we're still seeing people completely engaging with this agenda, understanding that it's the right thing to do and wanting to be behind it for that reason. It's considerably ambitious, as I've said before, but there's a huge amount of will to make this happen, which makes it an absolute joy to be a part of, to be honest. And so, as I say, the key thing about this slide really was just to demonstrate that it's not about kind of tearing something up and starting again, and it's not about having a top table that's a mile long with everybody sat around it. It's about understanding where your clinical leaders are at neighbourhood, place and system. It's about understanding the networks that they're currently hooked into and that are working, and then networking those networks to make sure that we've got that kind of that communication round, and that we are promoting leadership over leaders. It's not about leaders per se, it's about that leadership function across the system and making sure that clinical and care leaders are able and resourced to deliver on that. And I think this is the key one really, before I just go on to what we're doing to support and then I'll stop talking. So just a few reflections in terms of some of the barriers and the motivators that we're seeing in systems at the moment. So none of these will be a surprise to you, I shouldn't imagine, in terms of some of the barriers. So silo working persists, especially in perma crisis, as we as we seem to be at the moment. Professional identity, I think, is a really important one here. So as we're talking about increasing the clinical range of leaders in those different roles, it can feel quite threatening when we're talking about a multidisciplinary approach and that system approach. People feel that their specialism is what defines them in that role, and of course it is, which is why reframing professional identities is the first one on my list on the other side, actually, because I think it's an absolute strength to any MDT is that we are all bringing something really important to this teamwork. And on the next slide, there'll be a QR code for our podcast. And one of the really, really insightful things I heard when we were recording that was we need to recognise that no one individual or no one professional group has everything required to make a system work and to lead it at a system level. We are all required for that to happen. And if we start to kind of reframe the conversation in that respect and appreciate that kind of diversity of voice and thought and leadership style and leadership approach across our health and care systems, that's when we're really going to start to see the changes that we're hoping to see. As I've touched on already as well, the parity of respect can be quite an issue, I think, in terms of that cultural shift that we're trying to see, making sure that different professions come to one another, meet them where they are, and have that mutual respect for their colleagues and what they're bringing to the table, understanding what it's like to walk in their shoes. I think that 54,000 example is a prime example, isn't it? A key thing to principle 4 as well is that walking, which 500/800 is a perfect example of, actually, is that being able to walk in colleagues' shoes, understand what the system looks like from their perspective, and understand how they view the world and how it feels from their seat. And only when we start to do that can we change how we view what might be the solution to the problems that we're all experiencing, and opening up that team conversation about it. As you just described, if you had an insight into that kind of 54,000 contacts for 600 people, we might not necessarily always jump to primary care or the solution to all of secondary care's problems or anything else like that. So I think that's a really good example of why that's really important. That leads also obviously to lack of trust and understanding if we don't understand where other people are coming from, and we're kind of stuck in our own siloed views and implicit behaviours and the dynamics. I think we're trying to change the direction of a ship that's been sailing for 70 odd years now, aren't we? And that is going to take time and energy, and an awful lot of culture is quite invisible, especially to those influencing it the most. So how we can work to nudge behaviours in the direction that we're hoping to is key to that. And I've touched on some of those other points, so I'll kind of move over to the other side really and just say that investing in people and system leadership development in terms of skills, culture and behaviour is key to this work, as is that modelling the open, trusting and honest collaboration, being okay to fail and being open to learning together about what those failures mean and what it might mean to do it better in the future, and that curiosity and willingness to understand the world from our colleagues' perspectives is key to ensuring clinical and care leadership is an enabler for integrated care as well. So just very quickly what we're doing, we've got a report due out very soon in terms of systems experience of doing this work to date. It actually ends as the frameworks were produced, but there's a huge amount of learning in there. And we're hoping to be able to share that with you very soon. Also, the System Climate Survey and our maturity exploration tool in terms of helping systems understand where their clinical and care professional leaders are currently, how they're feeling, what it's like to be on the receiving end of the system, and how engaged they do feel currently and involved in the vision, purpose and work of the system, so that we've got a baseline then to plan and move forward, taking our colleagues with us in that respect. The podcast is out now. We've got it's a 5-part series. Episodes 1 and 2 are available, and the QR code there will take you directly to episode 1. I would encourage you to have a listen. I've had lots of really positive feedback, and lots of people have described how it helps this work come to life and for them to really understand what we're talking about. So please do have a listen. We've got a thriving national community of practice that Andy mentioned previously. We've got 300 odd people on that meet regularly to really get into the nitty gritty of what we need to do to make this happen. What are those HR processes? What do they need to look like? What are the forms we need to make sure we've got in place? How do we have a professionally agnostic panel that makes sure they are objective in that sense? How do we approach remuneration when we're looking at professionally agnostic roles? Lots of really nitty-gritty conversations that really do enthuse me that we're aiming to do this meaningfully and properly, which is fantastic. And we've got a national kind of roadshow of workshops that we're running with every system in the country, followed by bespoke practical support from our national subject matter experts and national advisors who can support with kind of capacity and headspace on the ground to really support the practicalities of making this happen. Just a little bit there, which is more for you when you get the slides afterwards, in terms of links to the guidance in the podcast and my email address. If you'd like to be connected to the community of practice or connected to the work in your area or anything else around clinical and care professional leadership, please do get in touch. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Maria. That's really great. I recognise you've got to go for a train soon, don't you? So I don't want to keep you.
You're all right. I'm okay for a few minutes if there were any questions, Susie, but I appreciate that your agenda's running over slightly. So
yeah, just any questions for Maria before we head off into the action learning sets? No, I mean, on a personal reflection, I think the work that you're doing centrally is fantastic. It gives a really good framework and it enables systems to properly think through what you're trying to deliver in terms of integrated leadership and how they can be supported at a local level and supporting that local decision-making approach. So I think it's fantastic. And anything you think would be helpful for us in the Northwest, which is where we're focusing at the moment. I know we're looking at how we can share what each of the ICBs, ICS have come up with in terms of their own frameworks and how we can share that with you guys as well across the CLN in the Northwest. So thank you, Maria. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it. Have a lovely journey, and we'll catch up with you really soon. Thank you very much.
all right. Thank you. No worries. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, it's feeling like this. It's on a personal level. I've absolutely found the speakers today to be absolutely fantastic. There's been some real great insights, and the kind of the joined up between each of the speakers has been really powerful. I am noticing that we are probably, as expected, seeing a bit of a drop off in terms of attendees today. But if you can stay on for the action learning sets now, it would be really, I think, really helpful for you on a personal level, but also it'd be really powerful for us to be able to kind of reflect on what you've heard today, how you want to take it forward within your own organisation or within your own system, and then what we as a collaborative can pull together to kind of share back to your ICBs, to your ICSs, to tell them what you need from them and how you want to take things forward.